Your teen requested a ride, but this time not from you. It's through their Uber teen account. You drive your teenager around, a lot, to their friend Jacob's house, their other friend Jake's house, to James's, to Jaden's, to Jalen's, to...
Mom? This is Jake's house, not Jacob's.
Now with an Uber teen account, your teen can request a ride under your supervision. They'll ride with a highly rated driver, and with live trip tracking, you'll follow along the whole ride to their friends' houses that all sound the same. Add your teen to your Uber account today. See app for details.
Bye, Mom.
The Starbucks cold brew you love is now available in a can. It's so good you'll believe that too good to be true can be true. Like finding out that you and your crush have been listening to the same playlist on repeat. With the smooth taste of Starbucks cold brew in a can, sipping is believing. Available in 3 delicious flavors. Shop now wherever you buy groceries. Click or tap the banner to learn more.
Have you ever wondered how far you'd go to keep your weekend plans alive? Picture this. It's the summer of 1989, and 2 young employees are ready for a dream getaway at their boss's swanky beach house. But there's a twist. When they arrive, they find their boss, who unbeknownst to them has been stealing from the company, is very much dead. What follows is a wild 48 hours filled with dirty old drunks, bikini-clad ladies, and an unsuspecting corpse that seems to still be the life of the party. Sound ridiculous? Of course it does. But who needs logic and common sense when you've got 90 minutes of slapstick and sightgags? This is one weekend we'll never forget. So grab your sunglasses, jump in the golf cart, and meet us at the big house at the top of the dune as Nicholas Pepin, Chad Sheppard, and I discuss Weekend at Bernie's from 1989 on this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
How would you two like to come to my house at the beach?
Bernie Lomax would be the perfect host, except for one small thing.
What kind of a host invites you to his house and dies on you?
Now, the only way they're going to survive the weekend
Is that the killer?
is to make it look like Bernie has.
Bye-bye, ladies. We'll see you later.
Weekend at Bernie's, a lively comedy about a guy who isn't.
Did you hear something?
Now playing at a theater near you.
I'm Tim Williams, the mastermind behind the mic at the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. Joining me on each epic episode is a guest co-host who's as crazy about 80s flicks as they are about wearing parachute pants and solving Rubik's Cubes. We're diving into nostalgic treasures we saw at the local theater, rented on VHS tapes, or discovered on cable TV. From blockbusters that make you say,
I feel the need for speed.
To hidden gems that'll have you screaming,
They're here.
It's a blast to relive these old memories and share our thoughts on what made these movies so special. We reminisce about our first time watch experiences, share our favorite scenes, and even discover fascinating behind the scenes tales about the cast and crew along the way. Haven't hit that subscribe button yet? What are you waiting for?
Come on, do it.
On Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And hey, while you're at it, be a pal and drop us a written review along with a 5-star rating to tell us what you think about us.
The sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
Take a day off and come hang out with us on social media. Just search 80s Flick Flashback on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And don't forget to bookmark 80sflickflashback.com for more gnarly content.
Get out of town. I didn't know you did anything creative.
Want to crank it all the way up to 11? Become a supporter on buymeacoffee.com for only $5 a month.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Click the link in our episode show notes, and while you're there, soak up the extra trivia and fun stuff that didn't make it into today's show. Thanks again for tuning in. Now, let's get right into today's episode.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Welcome in, everybody. So glad to have you on this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. So glad to have my two guest co-hosts back again. You know them, you love them. We've got Chad Sheppard and we've got Nicholas Pepin from Pop Culture Roulette. How you doing, Chad?
Doing well. How you doing, Tim?
I'm good, man. How you doing, Nicholas?
I am excellent. How about you?
Good. So, Weekend at Bernie's, when I posted this one, you guys jumped at the chance to talk about this crazy, zany movie that I had to sometimes remember came out in the 80s because it did come out in 89. So if you didn't really see it the year it came out, it kind of falls somewhat in more that 90s movie category. But let's jump in. Chad, when did you see Weekend at Bernie's for the very first time?
I was a younger fella. I did not see it in the theater. I had to have rented it after, like, my parents would not allow me to watch. This was PG, right?
PG-13, but it's a very mild PG-13, I think.
Yeah, but it still was 13. So, like, I never did tell you this, and I don't know if I'll be on that episode, but I wasn't allowed to see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade until I think it came out on video.
Oh, wow.
So this was another I saw later. Was unable to see it, but I got them confused with the second one. I thought Weekend at Bernie's 2 was an 80s movie.
No.
Yeah, I know that now, but I could have sworn, like, and I saw that it's 93, and I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I was kind of fairly young. Probably watched my friends at HBO, so he recorded a lot of the HBO shows. I've said that before, and
right?
Watch it there. So yeah.
Okay. What about you, Nicholas?
I distinctly remember going over to a friend's house, and probably the same friend that I've talked about many times on this podcast in the past. We'd rent a lot of the movies that I'm not going to say my parents wouldn't have let me watch, because this one I feel like I would have watched with my dad, and he would have really enjoyed the anti-logic of most of this movie.
Yeah, very anti-logic. That's good.
But yeah, no, I distinctly remember watching it and just really loving it. And then a couple years ago, I purchased it on DVD. I needed like $5 more for the free shipping on Amazon. I was like, perfect. My excuse to finally buy that movie.
Yeah, this was a $5 at Walmart purchase for me.
Gotcha.
That and the second one. I think they had a special 2 for $10.
Yeah. This one I've seen a couple of times. I think I'm trying to remember if I saw this in the theater or not. I do know there's a funny story with my older sister, who told my parents that she had gone to go see this movie with one of her friends, but we kind of all knew that she didn't, that they did something else that they probably weren't supposed to do, or saw a movie they weren't supposed to see. And so I remember her coming back home, and they, were acting, a little bit more goofy than usual. And I think I popped up as the little, the goody two shoes little brother, and said, what part did you like? And she couldn't tell us anything that wasn't in the previews. So we kind of, she was kind of found out. So I have that. I remember that more than actually seeing it at the theater. I think I wasn't in Texas when this came out. I was in Maryland, but in Maryland we did have a movie theater on. Yeah, so I was in Maryland, so we did have the movie theater on base. So this is I probably saw this at the theater on base. But once again, those movies were shown like 2 months after they'd made their run in the regular theater. So I don't think I went and saw this when it first came out. I think I waited until it made it to the theater on base and watched it then, but really liked it. But I even remember then thinking all the funny parts are in the commercial. Like, there wasn't much outside of what you saw in the commercials or the trailers that I felt were really, really funny. And I know I watched it a couple of times when it came out on video. I don't remember if this is the one that I owned. It was probably one that I had recorded off of cable at some point, but it's not one that I found myself watching over and over and over again. And then, speaking of the sequel, I've probably only seen Weekend at Bernie's 2 once and just did not like it at all. So I've never really rewatched it. But how long has it been since you rewatched it before rewatching it for the podcast?
When I purchased it on DVD a couple years ago, I was like, I must watch this. And I did. And I was like, yep, it's every bit as stupid as I remember, but stupid fun. The sequel, I'm with you. I saw it once and I don't remember it all. And I can't find it anywhere. So Brad must have gotten lucky and purchased it when he did, because it's not streaming anywhere, and it's not like I can't even purchase it on Amazon, I don't think, or not for like a reasonable price.
Yeah, I think you have to find like the combo DVD pack to find the second one. I think because I saw a couple of pictures of the combo, like an old DVD combo, but those are probably out of print, like way out of print. So, but what about you, Chad? How long has it been?
Since I bought it, that was the couple of years ago from Walmart. I watched it, and I unlike you two, I have seen Weekend at Bernie's 2 so many times. Again, I kind of thought they were not the same movie, but
right.
I thought they were. Well, yeah, it kind of is. Like watching this one the other day, I was like, well, when does he start getting up and dancing to the music?
Oh yeah,
that's 2.
Yeah,
yeah.
So I wonder for you, do you think you saw the second one first before you saw the first one, or did you see them in order?
Probably. I probably saw the second one first.
Yeah. That's how it was. Yeah, go ahead.
I was 14 in 93. So yeah. I remember it and it being popular and the older folks talking about it. And
it's kind of like when Laramie and I were doing Superman and Superman 2. Like all the stuff in Superman 1 that I really remembered was all the stuff that they replayed in Superman 2. And I realized I had seen Superman 2 way more than I saw Superman 1 as a kid. And so, but I didn't realize to go back and rewatching them. So, but yeah, I had tried to watch this. It was on one of the cable streamers or cable channels on demand, probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, oh man, I haven't seen Weekend at Bernie's in a long time. I'm going to watch it. And I turned it on and I was like, I don't remember it being this stupid. Like it just, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I really wanted to watch at that time. So I got through like maybe 20 minutes and I was like, you know what? I need to watch this another time. I'm just not in that mood for that type of goofy funny. But when I rewatched it yesterday, I laughed so much. Like I was having such a great time watching it. And I think because I remembered, like remembering how goofy it was and, don't even think about logic. And the crazy thing was Tyra was sitting on the couch with me. She watched parts of it at the end and she's like, why would they do that? He would be so bloated after being in the water the longest. And Tyra was like, there's don't think about logic. There's no logic in this movie at all.
What you're talking about the non-logic. I want to, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
I like anti-logic better. Yeah. Go ahead.
As a man with a certain kind of haircut, when they pulled his toupee off,
right,
and they stapled it back, the rest of the movie his hair was perfect again. Like, how did that work?
Yeah,
that's what I was. I mean, that's one of the things that baffled me, among others. But
yeah,
well, I'm sure we'll get to some more. I've got a couple.
Yeah. I've got some. When we get into trivia, I've got like some actual, scientific stuff of like what really would have happened in the time frame. So, all right, well, let's jump into story origin and pre-production. I found that I kind of had a hodgepodge some stuff together for this, but I found an article that was really helpful. So I kind of tried to tailor some of this back. But so anyway, here we go. Producer Victor Draa, D-R-A-I, who had made the Gene Wilder rom-com The Woman in Red, now most famous for Stevie Wonder's Oscar-winning I Just Called to Say I Love You song, had teamed up with Klain for an adaptation of the French comedy The Tall Blonde Man with One Black Shoe, which became the early Tom Hanks vehicle, The Man with One Red Shoe. Dre said, I love that script. We worked on it for 6 months or a year. When we finished, I asked Klain, who's the screenwriter, do you have any other ideas? I want to try to find something original. He said, yeah, I have an idea, but nobody would ever buy it. It's about two kids who drag a dead guy around Fire Island. And I said, that sounds crazy and funny. At the time, Dre had a deal with MGM. After some initial reluctance from the studio, he got the go-ahead to develop the pitch into a screenplay, but the studio ultimately balked at the script. He said, if someone pitched you an idea about 2 kids with a dead guy, you'd think they're crazy, which forced the producer to look elsewhere to get the movie made. As luck would have it, he was friends with Ted Kotcheff, who months earlier over lunch asked him what he was working on. He said, I gave him some of the Bernie gags, and he said, that sounds funny. Please let me read the script when it's finished. I had forgotten the conversation. We had another lunch, and he said, what happened to your script? And I said, oh, I just finished it. Do you want to look at it? He read it and said, I'd love to do it. Weekend at Bernie's screenwriter Robert Klein was possibly inspired by a seemingly apocryphal, is that how you say that? Apocryphal, but
Yes.
well-vetted tale of old Hollywood. After actor John Barrymore died at age 60 in 1942, his friends, actor Errol Flynn and director Raoul Walsh, slipped a mortuary worker $200 to check out the body for an hour to play a prank. They set him up straight on a couch and pretended he was alive but sick, and tried to get Flynn's butler to revive him with alcohol and coffee. Both participants have recounted the story in their memoirs. Barrymore's granddaughter, Drew Barrymore, claimed on Hot Ones that the story was true, and when Weekend at Bernie star Andrew McCarthy was guest on her talk show, she asked if her grandfather had inspired his film, and he said, that could well have been true, but we do not have such a fine pedigree as that. We were just fools running around with a dead body. So I thought that was kind of cool. According to Mel magazine, screenwriter Robert Klein gave the script the title Hot and Cold, and it went into production under that name. It didn't sit well with Terry Kaiser, who played Bernie. Halfway through the movie, he said, I went up to the producer and the writer and I said, boys, this isn't hot and cold anymore. I hate to tell you. They didn't realize how much Bernie had become the forefront of everything. I said, Weekend at Bernie's is the title, and they said, I think you're right. But director Ted Kotcheff claims that he came up with the final title. After a Weekend at Bernie's test screening, a studio public relations rep ordered Kotcheff to devise a new name. He said, I always thought Bernie was a funny name, so I came up with Weekend at Bernie's. So there's some discrepancy of who came up with the title, but we can all agree it's better than Hot and Cold.
Way better.
And for those that don't know who Ted Kotcheff is, this is one of the few comedies he made. We've talked about him on previous episodes like First Blood, which is not a comedy at all.
No.
I was going to say there's a line in there. Larry says, you can come out now, Rambo.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, he did do that one, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice little nod to the director there. He also makes a cameo in the movie. If you didn't know that, we'll get there too, which I didn't realize that till doing the notes. I didn't know that was in that scene. So anything you want to add or discuss about the making of? I think the biggest shock is that they actually made this movie like they thought this was a good idea.
Yeah, especially back then when there was a much more limited release for movies. I mean, they were in '89, there was definitely a lot more direct video than there would have been earlier in the 80s.
Yeah.
But I could see them doing a movie like that now because you've got to fill the original content on, 45 different streamers.
Right.
And you're just like, let's throw a couple of young up and coming, comedians and an established guy and just have some stupid fun. But that's just because, like I said, you've got, however many different streamers looking for original content. But back in '89, it's kind of a minor miracle they got this done at all.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like this would kind of fall in the category of like any John Cena movie that goes straight to a streamer service, like Vacation Friends or Ricky Stenicki that I guess he just did recently. That's just completely stupid and utterly unbelievable, but you watch it because
both of which I watched because they were streaming.
Right.
I didn't have to pay to go see them in the theaters.
Exactly.
I like John Cena, his acting.
I do too.
Like,
he's funny.
Peacemaker is fantastic. Yeah.
Some are better than others. Like I did watch both Vacation Friends, and we did laugh a lot. Watch those. I haven't watched Ricky Stenicki yet, but I kind of get the gist of it from the previews. I mean, once again, you know what you're getting into when you watch it. So I do like the memes now where it says like he's turning into Jim Varney, which I think is hilarious.
Know what I mean, Vern?
And now these messages.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop Culture Roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
Hey there, fellow 80s movie aficionados. Are you ready to embark on a nostalgia-filled journey to the greatest era of cinema? Then look no further than the Retro Life for You 80s Movie Podcast. Join us every week as we rewind the VHS tapes, dust off those Betamax classics, and dive headfirst into the neon-soaked, totally tubular world of the 1980s movies. From the Brat Pack to action heroes, we've got it all covered. Breakfast Club, Ghostbusters, E.T. and Indiana Jones, and more. It's like a trip in Doc Brown's time machine, but without the DeLorean. So whether you're a die-hard 80s film buff or just curious about the cinematic gems of the past, Retro Life for You is your ticket to the ultimate movie time warp. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Retro Life for You, and we can be found anywhere you listen to your podcast, as well as on our website, www.retrolife4u.com.
The Starbucks cold brew you love is now available in a can. It's so good you'll believe that too good to be true can be true. Like finding out that you and your crush have been listening to the same playlist on repeat. With the smooth taste of Starbucks cold brew in a can, sipping is believing. Available in 3 delicious flavors. Shop now wherever you buy groceries. Click or tap the banner to learn more.
Persol and Verilux are teaming up for the ideal eyewear fit, combining timeless design with progressive lenses. Iconic style meets unparalleled vision performance, making the extraordinary effortless. Discover Verilux and Persol and find your local Essilor expert at Essilor.com.
All right, well, let's talk about casting. So Andrew McCarthy as Larry Wilson. I actually know a guy named Larry Wilson, which I thought was funny. McCarthy's first major role was in the 1983 comedy Class opposite Jacqueline Bisset. He was a member of the 80s Hollywood group of young actors dubbed by the media as the Brat Pack. The group starred in a few films, among them St. Elmo's Fire and Pretty in Pink. McCarthy appeared in the 1987 films Mannequin and Less Than Zero. In 1985, he starred with Donald Sutherland and Kevin Dillon in Heaven Help Us, also known as Catholic Boys. And he made his Broadway debut in The Boys of Winter, which quickly returned. Then he quickly returned to Hollywood in '88 to star in several films, including Fresh Horses and Kansas. But this was like, I think after Mannequin, this was probably his only other big hit. Fresh Horses and Kansas didn't do as well, but and of course he's got the new documentary on Hulu about the Brat Pack. Any thoughts on Andrew McCarthy?
I enjoy him. I mean, he's a mainstay of the 80s movies that I love. So
yeah, I would almost say this is my favorite movie of his, just because he's playing so different than everything else. Like he is like wild, zany, like just, over the top. And in everything else, he's kind of been more like the cool, calm, sophisticated person. So
yeah, I'd have to look at the list and figure that out. I did not do my research on Andrew McCarthy.
Well, I mean, you think about like Pretty in Pink and St. Elmo's Fire, the earlier ones. He is more of like the calm-headed one of the group. And even in Mannequin, he's a little wild, but in this one as Larry, he's just, he's the oddball. He's and which I think, I want to say that I'd read, and I didn't put in here, that John Cryer was actually auditioning as well, and they wanted Andrew McCarthy to play the role of Richard. But when McCarthy got the script, he said he didn't want to play Richard. He wanted to play Larry, And so they gave him that role and then brought in Jonathan Silverman to play, I guess, more the straight man. So, which I think works. I mean, I could see John Cryer being that wild and crazy, but once again, you see him doing that anyway. So that's why I like this. I like this role for Andrew McCarthy to kind of be wild and crazy and be different than what he's been in other things.
Liked him in these movies, both the first one and the second one.
Mm-hmm.
Acting wise, of course I saw him in the Brat Pack movies and like that. He is a director now.
Yeah, he's done a
big TV director, and I think I last saw him. He was on that medical show. I think it was filmed here in Atlanta.
The Resident.
I think it was on that one. Or
I did find out that he's responsible for a lot of the movie's on the fly humor. He's the one that came up with stapling the toupee on top of Bernie's head, tossing him over the side of the balcony of the sand. He talked about those in his memoir. He did work closely with director Ted Kotcheff to create one scenario in which dead Bernie waves to a couple of women in bikinis. McCarthy took the game Monopoly from the condo where he was staying during the shoot, set it up, and played a game with Bernie. He said, the game not only gave me something to do, it illuminated character and enlivened a modest scene. He added the scenario enabled him to tie fishing line to Bernie's wrist, making the wave that much more plausible. So I guess before they probably just had him like throwing his arm up like they were doing in the golf cart. So,
Jonathan Silverman did that a lot. They were driving.
Yeah. McCarthy also directed one of the scenes because Kotcheff wasn't available. He was cameoing as the father of Jonathan Silverman. So he played the dad that comes out in the middle of the night, which I think is hilarious. One of my favorite scenes. But despite the creative freedom, Kotcheff was a bit of a terror on set. McCarthy says Ted was an explosive guy who occasionally lost his cool, screaming profanities through a bullhorn at scores of extras or throwing the assistant director's walkie-talkie into the sea when it went off during a take. How much fun was that?
I also saw in the information that it was not filmed in the Hamptons, it was filmed in North Carolina.
Yeah, yep. On the beach of North Carolina. They couldn't afford to rent any of the houses in the Hamptons. Right. So they built their own in North Carolina and then tore it down as soon as the movie was over.
Oh. So you can't go visit it?
Nope.
Oh.
Yeah.
It seems like such an incredible, like massive amount of budget to build a house.
Yeah.
To just take it down.
Yeah. That just tells you how expensive the houses are in the Hamptons. But there was something about there's a turtle migration that's very popular in that area. And so where the house was interfered with where the migration routes of the turtles. So they had to use that part of the beach. They had to agree to tear it down after they built it. So movie making at its finest. Yeah. And it's funny because with Kotcheff being kind of like, aggressive or, kind of loud on set, I love the line that he gives Richard, which is like, if you don't mind laying out my suit for tomorrow morning, he's like, how about I'll lay you out?
Yeah, that was in my list of favorite scenes. Just like,
yeah.
You let your butler talk to you that way?
Why are you whispering? Am I whispering? Yeah. The walls, they're very thin. My neighbor's downstairs, walking, and that was just a great funny scene. So, well, speaking of Richard, let's talk about Jonathan Silverman. Silverman is known for his roles in the films Girls Just Want to Have Fun in 85, Brighton Beach Memoirs in 86, the film version of the first Neil Simon Eugene trilogy. He was also in Caddyshack 2 in 88, Little Sister in 92, Little Big League in 1994. He played the role of Eddie in Beethoven's Big Break, as well as starred in the film Jam in 2006. He actually began his career on television with a recurring role on the sitcom Give Me a Break from 84 to 86. From 95 to 97, he played the title role in the TV series The Single Guy, which came on after Friends, I remember. He has also made guest appearances on Friends, CSI Miami, Psych, Hot in Cleveland, and White Collar. In 2014, he guest starred on Law & Order Special Victims Unit as a controversial stand-up comedian. I remember seeing Brighton Beach Memoirs as, before this, probably Caddyshack 2, because I remember going to see that. Oh, yeah. But I definitely remembered him from Give Me a Break. My family was a big fan of that show. We used to watch it all the time. So
he's one of the daughter's boyfriends, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
The first like couple of seasons before the chief died, and then they
brought in the grandpa. Else. Yeah, they brought in the grandpa. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then they went to like an apartment. somewhere, like in New York.
That was later. Like we're getting so off topic. You want to have a Give Me a Break podcast, but yes.
Oh, my bad.
When it went to the apartment, it's because NBC canceled it, and I think ABC picked it up. And so when it went to a different network, half of the cast didn't return. It was basically just Nell and Joey Lawrence were the only two characters that returned, so they had her moved to an apartment. So be on the lookout for Give Me a Break, a retrospective podcast coming to you soon. So
there you go.
I was always a big fan of A Single Guy. I know it only lasted a few years, but I remember really liking it.
I did too. It was funny when I saw that it actually ran from 95 to 97. Like I really thought it was only a 1-season show because it didn't last that long, but I guess it had 2 seasons. But there were some really funny episodes that I remember really liking that show when it was on.
Yeah, I think Conan had something to do with it. I don't know if he was a writer or he just guested on it.
Yeah,
but yeah,
he was probably a writer. Yeah,
I just remember really enjoying it and thinking it should have lasted longer. But that was in the era of if it wasn't Friends or Seinfeld, it just didn't seem to make it for whatever reason.
Well, you could tell they were trying to like keep it like Friends, but only with one person. And so it just it didn't really have anywhere for it to really go and grow anywhere. With, the single guy, it's him and like a friend, I think, of his, but you lost kind of that ensemble, which was the big thing. Like I said, Seinfeld was ensemble, Friends was an ensemble comedy. So trying to do something more with 1 or 2 characters was harder to pull off back then, I think. But I agree with you. I like that show a lot.
Yeah, I remember hearing the promos. It's Seinfeld, Friends, and The Single Guy.
Yeah, right.
Was it Must See TV?
Must See TV, yeah. NBC.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, moving right along, we'll talk about Terry Kaiser as Bernie Lomax. Terry Kaiser, during the 1970s and early 80s, he appeared on Three's Company, Hardcastle and McCormick, One Day at a Time, The Love Boat, Night Court, 227, Maude, and The Golden Girls. I remember the episodes with him on Night Court. I rewatched that a couple of, like last year or so. One of his roles in the TV drama Hill Street Blues, he was a cast member on the syndicated sketch comedy show Off the Wall and part of an ensemble on Carol Burnett's Carol and Company, which aired in 1990. In the 90s, he appeared on Walker, Texas Ranger, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman as H.G. Wells, and also on Will and Grace. His film appearances include Rich Kids in 79, Steel in 79, An Eye for an Eye in 81, Six Pack in 82, From a Whisper to a Scream in 87, and Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood in 1988. Did you recognize him from that, Nicholas?
It's been a while since I've seen that particular Friday the 13th.
Right. Yeah. We haven't gotten that far on the podcast, so I don't think I've seen that one yet. I remember him from Night Court, and I remember him from Six Pack, but that's pretty much all that I kind of knew him from. I'm sure I saw him on some of the other TV shows as well, but he'll always be Bernie. Even when even if you see him on something now, it's like, that's Bernie. That this is his most iconic role for sure.
Absolutely.
So he believes he landed the role because his mustache fit Bernie's character so well, and he only had it for a few weeks before because he hadn't bothered to shave it off during recovery from a motorcycle accident. Among other limited number of tools Kaiser used as a stiff, Bernie's permanent smirk. After a day of shooting and thinking his physical comedy wasn't funny enough, he developed the expression. He said, "I went back to acting 101. What is this guy trying to do? Well, he's goofing on these guys. So I decided I'm just going to goof on them all through the whole movie and see if I can break these guys up." So I guess I read a little bit more detail where he said they did the scene where, he gets, shot, he gets the poison, and he just had a blank look on his face. And he said he just looked like a dead guy. It wasn't really funny. But when he decided to add the little smirk and like it felt good going in and got stuck with him, he said the whole crew like busted out laughing. And he was like, well, if the crew's going to laugh, it should do really well. And then he said he just decided to keep that, and which made anytime they like had his expression, it made it funnier, which I agree. Him having that smirk kind of, made him look a little bit more alive than just like completely dead faced. So,
and he had to keep that up the whole time too.
Yeah.
That's gotta be hard.
This was a question I had. Like, how much did you think he did his own stunts? Like, how much was him, and how much was like? Because even Tyra Ash was like, "Is that a real person?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's I don't think they were smart enough back then to create a dummy version of him. He said the producers did use a stunt double portraying Bernie in every bruising, battering, corpse-abusing scenario, but that doesn't mean Kaiser didn't suffer for his art. He said, I broke 3 ribs during the course of filming. That happened when he fell off the boat. The scene where the boat hits the wave and he kind of jumps from the seat to the back of the boat. He said in one of the shots when he went up, he came down wrong and landed on his ribs and and broke 3 ribs. He also said I had a nerve in the back of my neck pressed down that was causing violent dizziness when they kept dropping me on the couch on my head. He said for like 2 days or 2 or 3 days after that, they had to literally carry him into the places to do his scenes because he couldn't walk because it was too much pain to walk. Suffering for your art.
So in other words, he basically just was a method actor.
Yeah. I'm not sure why he didn't have the stuntmen do more of that. Like, dropping, banging his head against the boardwalk or whatever when he's coming down on the wagon. I'm like, that surely had to be a stuntman. But I think they said for the boat scenes, it was all him except for when they're dragging him in the water. That was actually a stuntman. Like, I thought for sure that was a dummy. And they said, no, there was a stuntman that was doing that portion of him being dragged behind the boat and then hitting the bells or whatever.
Yeah, that looked very painful.
Mm-hmm. Physical comedy, but he made it work. I will say, though, and maybe I was the only one, but like when he's alive, like the opening scenes of Bernie in the office or whatever, I was like, if they remade this, which I don't want them to, but I was like, I could totally see Robert Downey Jr. playing the role of Bernie, especially in the beginning.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
All right, moving right along with Catherine Mary Stewart as Gwen Saunders. Of course, we talked about Catherine Mary Stewart on our last Starfighter episode, so I'm not going to review much of that. Her film roles include The Apple, Night of the Comet, The Last Starfighter, and of course, Weekend at Bernie's. She was also the original Kayla Brady on Days of Our Lives, if you're a Days of Our Lives fan. But I tend to forget that she's in this. I know her more from Last Starfighter, but I thought she was good in the movie. Decent love interest.
Yeah, I mean, for what she got. Yeah, she was all right. I mean,
yeah,
it was really kind of a two-hander anyway. I mean, didn't have a lot of cast outside of the 3 people. So,
and even the 3 people being Larry, Richard, and Bernie. I mean, there's really the 3 of them. Most of it, she kind of pops in and out to kind of give that little kind of subplot. But yeah, she really doesn't have that much to do. And she talked about when she first read the script, she was like, I don't know if this is really going to be funny, but I need the work. So I'll take, I'll take the role. But she wasn't sure how it was going to come across in the final product. But she does have good facial expressions. Like when her eyes get really big and she has that shocking look on her face, like she plays that pretty well. So.
She had good chemistry with Jonathan Silverman.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did. Overall, him, they kind of fit, like him being more the sweet guy, dumb and gullible and, a liar, but sweet, because he can't tell the truth for anything for the first, half of the movie. And she seems to be like endeared by that. So yeah, their chemistry was pretty good. All right, so we'll move into like the kind of the lesser roles. Don Calfa as Paulie, the semi-retired hitman, which was another one of my favorite characters. He worked steadily in both film and TV for over 40 years and worked alongside such high-profile actors and directors as Warren Beatty, Michael Douglas, Jack Nicholson, Martin Scorsese, and Steven Spielberg. Although he worked extensively as a dramatic actor, he's perhaps best recognized for his comedic performances, including this movie, the character Scarface in the movie Foul Play, Howell Grand in The Treasure of the Moon Goddess, and mad scientist Ralph Willem in Chopper Chicks in Zombie Town, which sounds like a movie that Pop Culture Roulette has covered at least once on their podcast.
Maybe. It sounds like something that we would cover, though.
Right, exactly. He's perhaps best known for his major role in the 1985 cult horror comedy The Return of the Living Dead, in which he played the eccentric, gun-toting, and beach blonde mortician Ernie Kaltenberger. So I don't think I've ever seen Return of the Living Dead, so I don't recognize him from that. But
is that the one with Tarman?
No,
I've never seen it.
I get those confused. All the ones in the 80s about.
Yeah, it's
okay.
I don't know. It's one of those that because Romero failed to copyright Night of the Living Dead, there was a lot of movies that were like, we're a sequel to Night of the Living Dead without actually officially being a sequel.
Yeah.
Leanna Quigley was definitely in that one. I don't remember if Tarman was in it or not. It might have been.
I think I've seen the second one, but I never saw the first one because the second one was more of a comedy, wasn't it? It was more like a.
It is.
I mean,
I just clicked on it and Tarman's on there. Yeah.
That one was kind of a comedy too. I don't know how intentional it was, but it was definitely.
It was funny to watch. I do like Paulie in this one. I mean, he's funny. I can't imagine him not being funny.
Yeah, he's got one of those faces. You know, I mean, he's one of the you know, that I can't necessarily always remember where I've seen him before, except for this movie. But like he has kind of he's got really good facial expressions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And my favorite line of his is when he's shooting at them at the end and they're like, you're out of bullets. He's like, yeah, but not this one. And he pulls out the other gun. Like, I just love, he's just over the top. Everybody's so over the top in this, which makes it so much fun. So, moving right along, we got Catherine Parks as Tina, Vito's cheating girlfriend, which is probably the most annoying character in this movie for me. She's perhaps best known for her roles in the 1982 horror movie Friday the 13th, Part 3 as Vera Sanchez, as well as this movie. She has appeared in TV shows, her first being Behind the Screen, and she later had a recurring role on the short-lived CBS series Zorro and Son in 1983. She made guest appearances on TV shows such as The Love Boat, who wasn't on The Love Boat in the 80s and 70s and 80s, Three's Company, Mike Spillane's Mike Hammer, Street Hawk, Tales from the Dark Side, Hunter, and Empty Nest. Bernie, come on, Bernie.
She said it, and I feel like she went out of her way to say Bernie differently every time she said Bernie.
Boiny.
Yeah. Boiny. Yeah.
When she came into the house for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so. I was like, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
All right, so we'll move along. I'll just mention Greg Salata as Marty, Vito's assistant. He's been in movies such as The Devil's Own in 1997, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze in 1991, and Pink Panther remake in 2006. Another guy, he seemed familiar, but didn't really know who he was. And then, of course, Vito was played by Louis Giambalvo, who is definitely that guy, because even Tyra was like, who is that? What's the guy's name? I have no idea, but I know I've seen him in like 1,000 things. And here are some of the things he's been in. Barney Miller, Heart to Heart, St. Elsewhere, Hill Street Blues, The Love Boat, Remington Steele, The A-Team, Simon and Simon, Fame, Knots Landing, Murder, She Wrote, Star Trek Voyager, Ally McBeal, ER, NYPD Blue, Boston Legal, Without a Trace, CSI, Ugly Betty, Dirty Sexy Money, and Raising the Bar. He also played Al Capone on the NBC series The Gangster Chronicles, and he was also in the award-winning television movie Gia, starring Angelina Jolie, playing her father, Joseph. His feature films include Bottle Shock, Gun Shy, Hoffa, and the 1983 horror science fiction film Nightmares. He's best known for his roles in such films as Airplane 2, the sequel in 1982, and Real Genius, as well as Jagged Edge in 1985, and the 1988 film The Deadpool.
That's why he looked familiar. You've just named about 100 things that I've seen.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's been in a million things, and that here. So yeah. I remember. I think he was one of the pilots in Airplane 2, the sequel, because I'd watched that not too long ago, and I saw Real Genius in the last year, so I recognized him from that as well. But all the TV shows, I'm sure I've seen him in.
I tell you what, I know you've mainly only done TV shows. I mean, not TV show, movies for 80s flick, but you might have to do a Love Boat. Because like I feel like you've talked about Love Boat more than any other thing on your podcast.
So funny story. Funny you should mention that. So I'm actually going back and watching all the Love Boat episodes on Paramount Plus because they have them. I have all the seasons and it's in HD. The other day I was cracking up laughing. They had an episode that had Betsy Palmer that played Voorhees' mother.
Okay.
And Linda Blair from The Exorcist were both on the same episode, and neither one was possessed or killing people. And I was like, why won't they just use them for what they're known for? So, but yeah, when I saw Linda Blair's name pop up, I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. And then I saw Betsy Palmer. I was like, wait, you've got The Exorcist and Friday the 13th on an episode of Love Boat. So yeah.
Did they make like little like jokes about it, or
No.
Love
Boat wasn't that meta back then. And the funny thing about Love Boat is you'll see like the same actors on the show, but they play totally different characters when they come in as a guest star. Like I've seen like certain people, like Jimmy Walker's been on there like 3 times, and he plays a different character each time. So
he's not JJ.
No, not at all.
Oh wow.
No.
Okay.
That would be fun to go back and like. I've seen Tom Hanks on Love Boat. I've seen Corey Feldman on there twice.
This could be a fun game for your listeners. Go back and listen to episodes to find an 80s flick flashback in which Love Boat wasn't brought up at least once.
Yep, that would be interesting. That would be interesting to find out. So, all right, back to the last person on the cast. We mentioned them already. The director, Ted Kotcheff, has a cameo as Mr. Parker. Just to give you some information about Ted Kotcheff, he is a director known for making First Blood movie in 1982. The other comedies he's made were Fun with Dick and Jane in 77, North Dallas 40 in 79, and Switching Channels in 88. Chad, you mentioned about the line about you come out now, Rambo. That was a nod to Ted Kotcheff. If you didn't know, George Chung, who plays the gardener, was also in Rambo First Blood Part 2, and he wears a costume similar to the one he wore as the villain, which I thought was an interesting little nod they did for First Blood Part 2 as well.
The gardener, they knocked out him and the other guy.
Yeah.
And put him in the closet.
In the closet, yep. All right, anybody else that I didn't cover on the cast? I think I've hit the mainstays.
Well, there is one person that I kind of want to. I thought about it and I was like, no, I ain't gonna mention it. But then I actually looked him up and found out what all he did.
Okay.
Like this in post is the little kid, the kid who buries.
Oh yeah. Barry keeps burying Bernie. And
it says his name his name in the IMDb is Bratty Kid. His name is Jason. Just had it. Jason Wallner.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on Shining Time Station. I remember that as a kid.
I have no idea what that is.
You don't know what Shining Time Station is?
Nope.
It was on PBS.
That's probably why.
It was a train station, and a little Mr. Conductor, who was played by Ringo Starr, and then he left, and then they made it George Carlin.
Oh,
you don't remember that?
I vaguely remember that now.
Okay, yeah.
There was 2 kids, and Shining Time Station was Thomas the Tank Engine. Is the stories that Ringo or George Carlin would tell.
Yeah.
And
I
he would
vaguely remember that. Yeah.
He would tell the stories to the kids. He was one of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to 2020, he's the director of the Borat sequel. I was like, what? I haven't seen it, but of course I saw the original Borat. And then I was like, well, how could they improve on that? But he directed that, and he also is a director on What We Do in the Shadows here recently too.
Oh, I love that show.
His IMDb picture is still the little kid from this movie. His little headshot, I guess.
That's cool.
So,
I did see. I did have him down originally, but when I looked, I was like, there wasn't anything that I would have really remembered or thought about him being in. But now you say that makes sense. So, good call there.
Well, I didn't have cable growing up. Like, I didn't have cable till like my 20s.
Right.
Because my parents thought cable was the devil.
Right.
So that's why I had to rent that's why I borrowed the videos from my friend who had HBO. So I watched a lot of PBS.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
So did I. I just don't remember that.
And now, these messages.
What's up, dudes? I'm Jerry D of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, books, fashion, and fads.
If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, he's got it covered. Wait, is there a lot of things to talk about for the 80s and Christmas?
Well, you got the movie giants like Christmas Vacation, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. There are TV specials like Muppet Family Christmas, Claymation Christmas Celebration, and a Garfield Christmas special.
Plus classics shown every year.
You also jam out to Last Christmas, Do They Know It's Christmas, and Christmas in Hollis. But most of all, it was a time for the most bodacious, best-selling Christmas toys ever, like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers,
and Cabbage Patch Kids.
Yes, them too. We cover them all, plus much more, including standard segments like Hap Happiest Memory, Gag Me with the Spoon, The Other Half of the Battle,
and Chant with the Littles.
So tune in to Totally Rad Christmas everywhere you get your podcasts. Turn the clock back and dive into those warm and fuzzy memories.
Later, dudes.
Are you a fan of movies and TV shows inspired by comics? Ready for a podcast that dives deep into the thrilling world of adaptations? Well, look no further. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. This is your go-to podcast for all things comics on screen. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and every Monday we explore the dynamic universe where ink meets action. We break down the classics, reveal hidden gems, and uncover the creative process behind your favorite adaptations. Subscribe to Moving Panels now on your favorite podcast platform and join us on this epic journey through the pages of comics and onto the big screen. Remember, new episodes drop every Monday. Don't miss out. Moving Panels, where every panel has a story and every adaptation is a blockbuster. Subscribe today, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
This episode is brought to you by Jira. Ever wonder how those big marketing campaigns that make headlines get delivered on time? It all starts with Jira, the only project management tool you need to plan and track work across any team. Every step of that campaign is organised in one place, from launching the campaign all the way back to designing ads and writing creative briefs. Get started on your next big marketing campaign idea today in Jira.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
All right, well, let's talk about iconic scenes, favorite scenes. Does this movie have an iconic scene? I don't know. So, Chad, if someone said Weekend at Bernie's, the first one, not the second one, what's the first scene that you think of?
The waving with the hand. That's
okay.
When he's playing and they're playing Monopoly.
Monopoly, yeah.
He pulls the thing and Bernie just waves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And one of the scenes that stands out to me is how hot it is in New York in these scenes.
Yeah. They're talking about the heat wave in New York.
Scene, the scene where they're on the roof with the tar on the roof.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Get tar all over the papers they're looking at. And
that's ink, sir.
Yeah. For iconic scenes, like I don't know if there's any one. I mean, I think the iconic is them carrying him around. Like and there's such a I mean, that's most of the movie, so like it's hard to, narrow. It's hard to narrow it down and say this one is so. But when I think of Weekend at Bernie's, like basically it's the poster, the two, the one on one side, one on the other. Bernie kind of slouched over in the middle, and everybody else being too drunk to realize that Bernie's been dead for 3 days.
Right.
Oh, that also is an iconic scene when they're in the house and everybody is talking to him like he's still alive.
Yeah.
And then they're like, both the guys are like, they don't know he's dead.
Right. They can't believe nobody can figure it out. But they just, it's like, I read some things about how can be seen as like a satire because it's basically that scene, especially is like how shallow people were, like, the rich, the entitled, like they're so shallow. They don't have a real relationship with anybody. They're all there mooching off of all his, all of what he has in this place. And don't really care enough about him to have a real conversation with him. They just, kind of talk at him and move on to the next thing. So
that's 80s smugness for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The height of Reaganomics. But anyway, for iconic for me, I think the boat scene is probably the one that I think of, like him being dragged behind the boat for some reason stands out to me as like iconic, but I agree. I think any scene with them like carrying him, like I love when they're trying to get him, hold the boat, they're trying to get on the ferry. Richard is the one that keeps throwing his arm up like he's waving. Everyone's like, hey, hi Bernie, hi Bernie. Yeah. So that's pretty well emblazoned in my mind. So what about favorite scenes? Any certain scenes you want to talk about?
I mean, it's so early in the movie, it's hard to call it a favorite scene, but every time I watch it, I love it. The two of them are walking and they're talking about how hot it is and just what they want to do, and that guy jumps out to mug them.
Yeah,
and Andrew McCarthy just like pushes him away and goes, "It's just too hot." And
Right,
they just
like,
keep
man.
walking, and the guy's just like looking at the knife and looking, just like, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah, that I laughed at that scene popped up. That was hilarious last night.
We've already talked about the Richards father coming out, that one.
Mhm,
But Bernie's fight. Now I'm going to do something for an audio podcast. I'm going to make quotation marks.
There you go. Air
But
quotes.
Bernie's fight with the hitman when he falls off the deck, like
and
I don't know,
lands
the second or
Yeah.
third time, and lands on the hitman, and like they're fighting like he's still somehow like,
That was good.
Yeah, that was a good one too. Yeah. What about you, Chad? You got any?
I liked how the gardener and the other guy, the maintenance guy,
Mm-hmm.
they all got hit in the head, put in the closet, and then they came out, and then they did it again. Like when Gwen was in, she came in and they just casually just did it again. They put broke the glass over the head and oh yeah, we do this all the time.
Yeah,
kind of what it looked like. Everything else is part two.
For me, favorite scene, we've covered a lot of them already. I do like the scene where when Rich Silverman and Catherine Mary Stewart, I was going to call her Mary Catherine, but that's the lady from SNL. Yeah, Catherine Mary Stewart, and they're on the beach and they're starting to like get romantic, and then all of a sudden you see like Bernie's body washes up next to them. Like that scene always makes me laugh. The lighthouse scene is funny too. When she's like, "No, don't look in the light," and then he looks in the light, and then he falls through. Oh, the other one that I was laughing at last night. I love it when Larry is hiding from the hitman who's coming down the stairs, and he grabs the phone cord and then like tries to choke him with it, but then ends up like wrapping him up. And then once he wraps him up, then he wants to fight him. Like he's just, come on, put him out, and he knocks him out. And then he picks him up and throws him down. And I'm like, was that planned? Because like there's no padding. Like he had to have hurt him when he picked him up and threw him on because it's a hard floor. When I watched that, I was like, man, did they plan that or that just happened? So I like that scene. It's all goofy and stupid and doesn't make any sense, but it was funny.
One of the scenes that makes, I mean, like I said, using the term anti-logic.
Yeah.
One of the scenes that just it makes no sense to me in a movie that makes a lot of no sense is when the hitman actually kills him. I want to say for the first time, but he actually killed him.
Right.
He pulls this little needle out and jabs him through khakis. And like, how in the world are you getting a needle through like all of his clothing? Like, and injecting him? Like, wouldn't the needle break off?
Right. Oh, and then he sits down like on his hand and he still pulls the needle out. And then he puts the needle in his jacket with the cocaine. And it's like, hey, can we talk about the cocaine problem in this movie? Like once again, probably went over my head as a kid, but when they go to Bernie's office, he goes in the bathroom, he's like, he keeps wiping his nose. He goes in the bathroom. He comes back out. I'm like, okay, Bernie's a straight cokehead, but I hadn't I'm sure went over my head as a kid.
I guarantee you the first time I saw it, I did not know that what was happening. But when I watched it again, I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, no, this is just nothing but coke.
Right. And then all of his friends are like, taking his money. And then you got something for me, Bernie? I don't see you're playing hard to get, like going through his pockets and, you found the good stuff. I'm like, so that was obviously not shocking for them to find drugs on his person.
I did find it funny. The guy who was trying to bargain.
Yes. About the car.
The car. And he kept going up and up. And he's like, okay, that's my final offer. Then probably goes, yes. Okay.
You're like family, Bernie. You're like family. And then I know I mentioned in the intro about, the dirty old men. When Catherine Mary Stewart first comes in and she runs into the real drunk guy. And then I guess his other friend, and he's like, oh, that's a nice outfit. It looked better crumpled up on my bedroom floor. I'm like, dude, come on, man. Like, that's just like terrible, So she runs away quickly. And I'm like, just, once again, one of those scenes in Eddie's movie that makes you cringe now. It's like that has not aged well at all. men that were clearly the age of her father that are hitting on her. But I know she also says like she's going back to college, but she definitely looked older than she was in college. Like she looked about as old, if not older, than both of them, Silverman and McCarthy.
Yeah, but I think, don't they make reference to having just got out of college or just started there? So
yeah.
I mean, if she's going back to finish off her senior year and they just graduated, then
This goes along with our other podcast, Nicholas, about people in their 40s playing 20 and 17-year-olds. So
that is true. Yeah, I mean, I guess because they weren't in high school, I didn't think to look that up. But
right.
They're way over 18, so it didn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into some scenes and trivia. I don't have a whole lot here. I will cover a few things. I think that we mentioned about how long about being quote unquote weekend at Bernie's. But the movie depicts the characters arriving on the island about 6:30 on Friday evening, and the movie actually ends around late afternoon, early evening Saturday. So it wasn't even a full weekend. It was really, about 24, possibly a little bit more than 24 hours, which I think I kind of put together this time. I was like, yeah, they really are only there overnight once. He still would have shown more signs of being dead. Catherine Mary Stewart told a story about Terry Kaiser being a real trooper playing Bernie. She said when they were shooting the scene where the boys discover him at the desk and realize he's dead, it was really Terry sitting there and he had to hold his breath while they got the scene. Ted let the camera roll after the scene had ended as a joke to see how long Terry could last. He slowly turned red and eventually gasped for breath. Everyone had a good laugh at his expense. Like, that's kind of mean. And he talked about there's been he's had college students come up to him and say that they've had nights where they rewatch the movie to figure out if they can catch him breathing in some of the scenes where he's dead. And he said they felt like, oh, you only lasted 2 minutes. Then we saw you breathing. He's like, well, I fooled you for at least a minute and a half, so it still works. So,
well, I don't know if it was him or his stunt double, but the scene where they put him in the wagon.
Yeah.
And then they pull him down the wagon to the golf cart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they dump the body over onto the golf cart, you see the dead person put their hand to make sure they don't fall off the golf cart.
Yeah, there's a few turns and way he falls that you can tell had to have been, planned so he didn't really hurt himself too bad. Cheap shot, but another funny scene. I love how when Bernie falls down the stairs and his one foot is still sitting on the railing. And so when the hitman comes back down, he tries to throw his foot out of the way, and it comes back and hits him between the legs. You got to have a good crotch. A guy getting kicked in the crotch in a comedy movie in the 80s. But
there were more jokes in part 2 like that of them him actually fighting, or not fighting, but them doing something, and he would the whole plot of the thing was he was actually able to move voodoo, but that's a whole other thing.
All right, so 2 true stories or some actual factual things. So according to Texas State University forensic anthropologist, a person who had studied dead things, Daniel Westcott, Larry and Richard would have had the person's name was Daniel Westcott. So Larry and Richard would have had a terrible time dragging Bernie's body around to keep it upright. Westcott likens this action to trying to carry a 150-pound bag of loose potatoes. He said Bernie's body would have been quite rigid. According to Westcott, rigor mortis, or muscle stiffness, sets in just a couple of hours after death. He said it will usually start to dissipate by 24 hours. So for much of the movie, he would have been in rigor. Also, for much of the movie's screen time, Bernie would have subjected to autolysis, or the breakdown of cells and the rotting that occurs when bacteria and fungus start the putrefaction, sure, I'm not a scientist, process and make bloating and stinking occur, which Bernie's friends certainly would have noticed. Once again, no logic.
By the end of the party, people would have been like, what's that smell?
Right. And he would have lost some color in his body. I mean, he looks more tan the next day than he did when he died. So,
he was out playing Monopoly in the sun, getting a nice tan.
Right. I don't want to really talk about the scene, but the most illogical scene of all illogical scenes, which maybe what Nicholas was waiting to talk about, was when Vito's girlfriend comes and effectively spends the night with him or stays in his room for 20 minutes. So
Lays with him in the biblical sense.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, I wonder if that is where a couple years after that, Kevin Smith got his idea when he did a very similar scene in Clerks.
Oh yeah. I know the scene you're referencing. Yeah. So maybe rigor mortis only set in that one part of the body. But anyway, moving on. Keeping it a family-friendly podcast. Yeah. So as we mentioned, Weekend at Bernie's washes over the fact that real corpses tend to rot and appear obviously lifeless, and that could have been a misguiding influence for two Denver men who attempted to carry out a real-life Bernie gambit. In August of 2010, according to CBS Denver, Robert Young and Mark Rubinson went over to the home of their friend, 43-year-old Jeff Jarrett, who was unresponsive and close to death. Rather than call for medical assistance, Young and Robinson dragged Jarrett to their car, and they embarked on a night on the town on Jarrett's dime. They patronized various bars, restaurants, and a strip club, retrieving money from Jarrett's bank account with the use of his ATM card. Later that night, after Jarrett had expired, Young and Rubinson took him back home and went back out with the dead man's credit cards, and then told a police officer there was a dead man at their friend's home. Officers eventually arrested Young and Rubinson. They avoided jail time for the charge of abuse of a corpse after agreeing to a plea deal.
There were a couple of women just recently, like in the last few months, that had a dead guy that they were, or a man who they were in charge of or had been taken care of. He died, and they threw him in the car and tried to take him through the drive-through bank.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, and the teller was like, no, that guy's clearly dead, and called the cops.
Wow. Yeah. See, it's still inspiring people today. It's not only funny, but it's inspiring. That's sarcasm for our listeners out there. So,
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about box office and critical reception. Wrap this thing up. Weekend at Bernie's opened in American theaters on July 5th, 1989. In its opening weekend, it landed in 8th, being beaten by such holdover smashes as Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, Batman, The Karate Kid Part 3, and even Dead Poets Society. Lethal Weapon 2 was the weekend's other debut release and was the #1 film. So for some reason, they decided to counter-program Weekend at Bernie's with Lethal Weapon 2. The producer says Fox stopped advertising the movie because they didn't get the numbers they wanted opening weekend. But Bernie's wasn't dead yet, doing steady business over the next several weeks. So it wasn't considered a blockbuster, but it did do well. I mean, it had enough to make a sequel, but I did read some of the notes about once it started getting some test audiences, like it tested really well with especially younger kids, which is why they were trying. They were originally, it was like they had an R-rated cut, and then they trimmed it down because they saw that it was working more with younger viewers, so they got it down to a PG-13. But they really expected it to be a bigger hit. But then the producer got mad because then the studio decided, oh, we're going to release it the same weekend as Lethal Weapon 2, which they weren't happy about because they knew it was going to get pummeled at the box office. So, which is what happened. But it still made money. It just wasn't as big of a hit as they hoped it would be.
I mean, I feel like this is also one of those movies that maybe didn't do. I mean, that was in the time period where we've talked about this many times, where movies would stay in the theaters for a long time.
Right.
But I also feel like this is one of those that like really found life at Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. And bringing it a PG means you're going to get more views on cable, especially back then, because they only played PG and PG-13 before 9:00. So it was going to get heavy rotation during the day, especially in the summer.
Because I feel like, I'm not even sure. I mean, it's so hard to remember 1989. I mean, that was a long time ago.
Right.
I don't know if I had heard of this movie until I watched it on video at my friend's house, which is entirely possible. Or the reason I was so excited to see it was because I had seen the trailers, and it was one of those that my parents were like, no, that looks stupid. We're not going to go see that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look at the competition it was up against. Indiana Jones, Last Crusade, Batman, Karate Kid Part 3. I mean, summer of 89 was a pretty huge year for movies. So that's why I think I didn't see it when it first came out. And Lethal Weapon 2, I probably waited and saw it like much later because it wasn't going to be at the top of my list of blockbusters to go see at that time.
And also, I definitely know I was at the height of my Batman mania. So
Yeah. I was back. You were back watching Batman for the 4th and 5th time instead of seeing Weekend at Bernie's, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Rotten Tomatoes has it at 54% on the tomato meter and a 57% audience score, 6.4 out of 10 with viewers on IMDb, and a 32 on Metacritic. It's not that bad, is it? I mean, it's got to be above the 50s, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm rating it on IMDb, I'm debating between a 6 and a 7.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I mean, it obviously has a lot of problems, but it's got a high rewatchability factor. You know, it's stupid, but it's stupid funny.
Yeah.
So I guess.
Oh, go ahead, Nicholas. I'm sorry.
I guess I'll give it a 6.5 then.
Okay. Yeah, that's decent. What do you think, Chad? Scale of 1 to 10.
I think it's pretty high, but 7.5.
Okay.
For me. Yeah, I thought for some reason I thought this movie was short when I was watching it the other day, and I was like, okay, well, this is longer than I thought it would be.
It's still not that long. I mean, I think it's on like
no,
an hour,
not really,
hour and 40 maybe. So
but,
yeah,
like I thought it was shorter for some reason. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think the version I may have seen before, like they edited out the lighthouse scene because I don't remember the lighthouse scene.
Oh, really?
At all. Like when he fell, I'm like, okay, well, that's I don't remember that, but I probably would rank part 2. That's a smidge higher because I've just seen it more times, and like I said, I was 14 when that came out, and I watched that more apparently. But,
yeah, apparently.
But I do like this one. So.
I'm not going as high as a 7. I think I'm in the like upper 60s. I think I do like a 6.7, 6.8 because like even when it was over last night, I told my wife, I was like, I said it was fun. I said I'm not gonna watch this again probably for another couple of years because you know all the gags that are coming. Like it gets very predictable, which is but there's still a nostalgic factor there for it too. So it's definitely one that I'll watch again, but it's not one that I'm gonna want to watch every year probably. And like I said, you kind of have to be in the mood for it too. It's kind of like an Adam Sandler movie or mindless comedy. You got to kind of be in the mood for that and not looking for something a little bit more meaty in the story department and logic department for that matter.
Yeah, I definitely would rewatch this over like a stupid Adam Sandler movie like Jack and Jill or something stupid like that.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being a part of the podcast. So Nicholas, what's going on over at Pop Culture Roulette? Anything exciting coming down the pipe for end of June, beginning of July?
Yeah, I think we're about to do the pop culture vehicle bracket that I've been threatening to do for a while now. I'm pretty sure that's what we're gonna have done just recently. So hopefully you enjoyed those episodes.
Does that include television show vehicles as well?
It will include a lot. I don't want to give too much away, but it will. It's a big one. It's a big one.
Is this a multi-episode one or just one?
It might be at least 2 episodes, but
Gotcha.
we'll see how it goes.
Well, definitely get ready to give a listen to that one for sure. So Chad, how are things at the radio? You're now the new afternoon DJ.
That's right. I'm the new afternoon
Drive
DJ.
time.
That's right. So if anybody's in middle Georgia, the south of Atlanta, above Macon, you can tune in to 92.1 and hear me in the afternoons now.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Nicholas and Chad, for joining us. That's a wrap on today's episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. If you had as much fun as we did, drop us an awesome review with a shiny 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button and spread the word to all your fellow 80s flick loving friends. Got questions or just want to chat about your favorite flicks? Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're feeling extra cool, support the show at buymeacoffee.com. Every little bit helps. Even $5 a month makes a big difference. You can also check out our online store at 80sflickflashback.com and tpublic.com for some killer 80s Flick Flashback gear and original designs. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I'm Tim Williams for the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. My old man worked hard. All they did was give him more work.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.